Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Cassidy Diamond. I am the Associate Director of Public Programs and Events here at the IDA. Thank you for joining us for what is going to be a great conversation around Discovery Plus's Introducing Selma Blair, moderated by IndieWire's Ann Thompson. Before we get started, I will offer a brief land acknowledgement, as I always do. I'm coming to you today from Chicago, which is on the unceded land of the Potawatomi people, who have been stewards of this land for generations. I would like to also thank IndieWire for coming on as our media sponsor for the screening series. Thank you as always. And you can check out our upcoming screenings at documentary.org/screenings-series. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Ann Thompson to get us started.
Welcome, everybody. I am really happy to welcome the fabulous Selma Blair. Look at you. You look fantastic. And the fabulous Rachel Fleit. This is her debut film, but it hardly shows it at all. And this is an unusual movie. I have to say I was very moved by it, but it's also hilariously funny, thanks to Selma, who, I would love you both to talk about a little bit how you both came together on this, how you found each other, and why, how this movie got started. Let's just start out there. Whichever one of you wants to go first. Selma, you go first.
I had done a photo shoot with Vanity Fair, and then the Vanity Fair Oscar party was I realized what a difference things had on people, on visibility and watching and just being honest with my story. And we'd ask Cass, who had shot that, Cass Bird, were we thinking of documenting this portion of life with stem cell, with just what's happening. I don't, to make sense of it for me, maybe for my son, for people in the public not knowing. And Cass had been on vacation with this incredible Rachel Fleit, and kind of got things rolling. And and then I kind of stepped back. I was the subject, and the team who's taking care of it got on. So it was Rachel, and our meeting immediately felt like home. It immediately opened it up to the verite being kind of the jam. Rachel, you better talk.
So Cass introduced Selma and I got on a FaceTime call with with Selma, and we had this incredible first meeting, right? So upon arrival on FaceTime, Selma is just disarming and charming. We like to joke that she tried to one-up me with her alopecia of her eyelash, which she
might not notice, right? I mean, Rachel has gone through this whole life hairless, but I have a one spot on my eyelash. I was trying to one-up her, Oh, me too. You have alopecia, I see. I gotta.
we have this instant connection, and I do think it has something to do with I have an autoimmune condition, and Selma has an autoimmune condition. That's something that we cannot control, that we're powerless over, that we have to find acceptance around. And I'd had my own journey with my own experience, and I sort of intuitively understood what she was going through. And then from there, there was sort of a timetable in place. There was a stem cell transplant that had been scheduled that would take place in July. So we had to get filming as soon as possible. So we started filming together in May of 2019. And
so how long after the MS diagnosis was that?
I initially had my MS diagnosis in August of 2018. Is that correct? I think so. And then I wrote something on my Instagram in October for the timeline. So in October, and then things started getting, I thought immediately I have relapse remitting MS. So it was thought, okay, well, we're going to start getting on path. But as things were getting more heated in my nervous system and found out about this incredible HSCT as being something that could probably really make a huge difference, I knew I was embarking on something totally new to me. I didn't know anything about HSCT, the process. I didn't find much online. So I was like, oh, let's also integrate this time. It's a momentous time. But
So that's the stem cell transplant that
yeah,
you eventually were aiming for.
Poetic stem cell transplant that Dr. Burt helmed at Northwestern. And so that gave me this kind of focus, and it was really a huge initiation of change for me physically and emotionally, just coming to this time. And in COVID, everything kind of getting knocked on our asses for a lot of people. Everyone kind of got this diagnosis. So as we went further into filming and we're in COVID, it all seemed to meld into where people are now. But I'll let Rachel talk again, because she is the filmmaker.
Rachel, go. So you had a time frame to play with. You had some serious deadlines to meet. But so you entered the home of Selma, and with your tell me about that. And embedding in the world, and how you two interacted, because she seems so playful and so much like there's a it's not only Selma, but Selma performing in some ways and helping you to come up with ways to show Selma. I'm curious about this. Sorry to put you in to talk about you, Selma. It's okay.
I love
Rachel.
It's me.
So from our first FaceTime call, it was very clear that Selma was funny. And when I went to film with her, there were three things that I'd sort of want to bring up right now about this whole process. One is that as soon as Selma and I decided we were going to make this film together, she very much took that back seat. She was very much the subject of this documentary. She didn't step foot in the edit, and she was not involved in creative decisions. She was like in this incredible state of, intense life circumstances and like deep, true surrender. And I saw that
having a director like Rachel was so important for me, even after the first day. I don't let people get a word in. It's a problem of mine, and I'm working on it. But Rachel does, thank goodness, for being a director and all, but it's like, whoa, she's not really directing. But then I realized at the end of even the first day, I was like, oh my God, we really, like, she sees it. Like, even when I would just talk, she could kind of maybe know where, like, what room to get me in, or where to, okay, let's start. You're going to talk about acting. And then I think, oh, acting, I gotta put something on. Like, I feel like I have to bring something to the party is my natural theatrical way. So maybe it lent itself to it because I get performative naturally. So Rachel really capitalized, and she saw it. I wouldn't have seen it. I would have said, sorry, I didn't do anything today, guys, sorry. But Rachel's very quietly started getting what she needed. I would have never seen it. I would have thrown anything where I'm talking away.
So what happened is that I arrive at her house, and we have this instant connection. I feel like Selma is family, but I also know that Selma is an actress. And I also know that she's going through this extremely intense time in her life. And I quickly realized that the way we were going to make this film was that if I allowed her to have these moments where we could like really sort of have fun with the camera, that was going to be really important. The second thing was that I was tracking the narrative, like what is the story here, but also giving my subject the time to sort of play. And in that, we joked a lot that we were making a film like Room meets Grey Gardens, because so much of what we did with Selma was in bed in this one room. And I am, you know, a verite documentarian to the core. Selma says in the beginning of the film, like, I always felt like I was in a documentary, but only God was watching. And I always felt like, where is my camera crew? Because this is so interesting. And so that, you know, I realized I found my perfect subject because Selma would break that fourth wall. She would sort of perform for me, but then we would get into these moments of like true, like locked in intimacy because she had this trust, because we had this relationship, because she was so vulnerable and willing. And that's really where, like, I like to say, like, the honesty like ripped, you know, we got to like really talk about the truth. And Selma is committed to the truth, and so am I, right? And in making this film, I knew we had something special because she was so willing to share what was really happening. And like, we're in this world of like Instagram filters where people are like, oh, I should look a certain way and I should act a certain way. And she was willing to sort of pull back the curtain and say, this is what's really happening in my life. And I had the honor and privilege to capture that on camera.
So what I'm curious about is that sometimes, Selma, you were in real pain. I mean, the first round of chemo was just awful for you, and you were showing. I mean, where was there a line? Was there ever a line where Rachel pulled back and said, "I need to give you some room," or did you just go for it?
No, I think there's even footage you have of like my neck. You know, that tube was like in my gut to my heart. And it's like, I never said any of that. Like, I wish I did, because I love that stuff. I'm so dramatic. Like, why did I never talk about that stuff? Or maybe I sent it, or maybe I was just too in the moment to care that, like, for me, because it's like, oh, I would have added all that, because that's fascinating to me. Like, what people go through medically to heal and to show what these doctors do. And, you know, instead it just looks like I have a Band-Aid, but that tube was in my, you know, in my heart, and I had that one in, and it's just amazing things. I didn't really feel it or anything. But no, I didn't. I totally trusted, and I've always been one that'll totally give myself over to whatever is needed at that time. You know, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not always motivated, but if someone shows up for me in that moment, I will show up for you. That's like all I can do. In general, I've always been that way. But no, there was nothing that I figured anything can kind of help someone with your own visibility or vulnerability. You never know what 5 people that feel the same, you know, that it really affects, whether they have a chronic illness or are recovering from something or mining things in their personal emotional life that has them in grief suspended. I felt in very safe hands, just being a conduit of telling the story for Rachel, who is much more capable in that time of composing meaning in that. And I'm
So Rachel, how did you cope with those feelings and those decisions? What was your approach?
With Selma, it was very clear that we had a connection, but it became very clear to me that in order to make this film with objectivity, I had to create an emotional distance between us, you know? So I, you know, would be in these like tight, intense moments with her in close quarters, and we would share so much together, and it was so intense, as you saw in the film. But then I'd give her a hug, and I'd wave goodbye, and we wouldn't speak in between filming blocks, because I knew that like so quickly that the immediacy and the intimacy needed to be captured on screen. And if she and I were like texting for like 2 weeks in between filming, the tension was going to be lost. So when I would show up for like the next block of filming, I knew nothing of what had happened. And so that as soon as we started filming that day, it was all fresh and new. And I think you experienced that sort of intimacy and the urgency of it all on camera because of that.
How far away were the blocks, and how long were the blocks?
You know, we would film for like anywhere from like 3 days to 6 days really at a time. Usually they were like, especially during June and July, they were pretty close together. I was very frequently going between Los Angeles, Chicago, and where I live, New York. So, you know, every other week we were filming for that intense period.
So there's a part of Selma, I keep Selma, I think, as I observe this, that this awful diagnosis provoked some reactions in you that came out of your character, whatever, however positive or negative those traits may have been in any other universe, they helped you here. This kind of impulse, perhaps, to fight, to prevail, to you know, not take anything lying down. I'm curious how you both perceive this part of Selma. Go for it.
You know, I'm one that can tread water for years and flounder, and has been the case. But when, you know, when I had something concrete to hold on to, such as a diagnosis, which is like receipts, you know, it's kind of like that moment when someone feels like, just for themselves, because receipts don't always matter to anyone else as time's gone on, but you know, the ways which I had felt just so lost, just so unheard. And getting a diagnosis to me was really nothing. What happened was amazing to me. I mean, there was some, because I didn't know anything about MS. I knew of Parkinson's because of Michael J. Fox and his, you know, when I was younger, you know, hearing it from that. And so, of course, you learn and know people that have it as life goes on. But I really didn't know much about MS, and never occurred to me. And that diagnosis was at first a bit baffling, like, what does that mean? Well, I have to get on a plane tomorrow morning. I can't go into the hospital for treatment. I must keep going. This is forever, right? Like, so what does it matter if I get treated now? And some of the treatments that I had taken immediately really made me worse. So my flare got more aggressive upon diagnosis, because I had a reaction to prednisone and then clinical cortisone and things. So it actually got worse after diagnosis. It wasn't like, oh, I got this diagnosis, I feel horrible. It was trying to treat it was causing more problems for me. So it was a little bigger. And so I announced it. And then I saw how much it helped people that just even thought of their canes as only a sign of aging or giving in or seeking attention, or people who need it imperatively more felt like, oh my God, okay, right, let's get visibility, everything. You know, it was just a very good response and heartened me. And I don't think I had found myself in so long, like a perspective, because I was seeing the world from so many, trying to be an okay mother and trying to be a good, you know, sober person again, and trying to wake up. And so this was just an amazing touchstone for me, the diagnosis. And then ultimately having this film to accompany me emotionally in a way, you know, and be able to package it in a way and let it go in a way that doesn't serve me, and you know, move on. But the stem cell put me in remission. It was an amazing thing, and I don't talk about it enough. But of course, it's not without humanity afterwards that realizes, oh, I'm not immediately gonna rebuild my stamina on, you know, these things. And so it's like, where do we show this? We're done with stem cell. And I had these visions, or Troy did, of like, oh, maybe I'll get back on the horse and jump and do stuff. And it's like, oh, the reality of recovering is a little more tedious. And I think Rachel really dug for me to tell a kind of truth of what I was afraid would hold me back from a more complete emotional recovery, of not, you know, we all have receipts that we want seen. And to my mother, to these that I truly love, but like how big things mean to show yourself. And then of course when my mom died, and I realized I'd been a little not hard on her in the film, just like one interpretation of something that I held as so kind of scary or intimidating or not meeting her approval. And then when she dies, and it's like, oh, no receipts matter. She's not there to see.
Yeah.
It's all just for my mom. It's just love. It's just trying to not know how to communicate or be ready for it in that moment, to meet your own emotional losses growing up, whatever it is. And this film really turned out with the help, I mean, with Rachel, it really was this perfect tribute to life before diagnosis, which in a way was which was harder.
So Rachel, do you feel that this thing that you all went through was healing for Selma?
I think it was healing for all of us. I mean, I will say this again and again, you know, I asked everyone that I interviewed about Selma, like, why would Selma do this? Like, what I really want to know always, like, the character's motivation, right? Like, I'm a verite filmmaker, but I also dip my toes into narrative always, and I kind of don't believe that there's a difference. They're all stories, and you know, why would my protagonist go, towards this stem cell transplant, right? And Selma says in the beginning of the film, like, now I just want to be a better person. And I watched her embrace herself. Like, I really did. Like, I do have a certain style that I approach every film that I make. And the one I'm doing now, it's like, I want to listen to you and I want to hear you. And from there, that guides the narrative. But I really saw in Selma that she was looking at this experience as an opportunity to, like, heal her heart and her soul. And that in this process of the stem cell transplant, you know, we pray over the stem cells in the film. That was my little hand in that too. I got to film that scene with my iPhone, which I say is one of the greatest days of filmmaking of my life, because it was so special. You know, it was like a real ritual. And so I watched Selma embrace herself, like all of herself, in making this film. And she gives us all permission to do the same. Like, one of the things, like, we joke about, like, the alopecia thing, but for real, like, I haven't had hair my whole life. And I stopped wearing a wig, like, when I was 18, but it took me a really long time to embrace, like, this silhouette. And I watched Selma lose all of her hair in the movie and just sort of walk around Chicago like it was no thing. And in her acceptance of herself, like, you know, and we have good days and we have bad days, and we have days that we love ourselves and we have days where we feel sort of bad, but her willingness to be so vulnerable and open with the truth and to really embrace who she is, like, it was so healing. It was healing for me to watch. I think it's healing for people to see it. I think we all had a spiritual experience making this film, like, truly, because we got to bear witness, you know, me and my cinematographer, Shane, and our sound recordist and our producers, we all were on this journey with this woman. And then Sloan, my editor in the edit, and Raphael, our composer, like, we all came together to embrace this woman on this journey, right? So I do feel like I saw a real shift in my subject, in my friend, in making the movie.
How do you feel like the movie helped you, Selma? What did it do for you?
Well, oddly, even though it is a documentary that I am the subject of, it humbled me. Instead of, you think, oh, you're the subject of something and now it's your leading lady role, this things that we kind of joke about or are real about. You know, I am an actress and I have many years in front of a camera. It is what I do. But normally, I mean, I don't even make, you know, I'm not someone that's always actually loved being on a moving camera. I've always loved a still photographer if lighting's good, but I'm actually not as comfortable in front of a moving camera and as myself. And it allowed me to really officially, like, give it away. I feel like it was a ritual that I really grew up. I've really been a kind of adolescent person for a very long time, just in my own makeup. And there was something about the ritual that, again, that gave me permission to leave that in the film. A lot of my unknowing naivete in life, even though I'm a world weary, you know, grown up, I still was always hoping my mom would swoop in and I could still be the kid. And there'd be my mom. And she'd be so proud that I grew up, and that she'd help me. She'd help me either write a book or help me be, present myself more beautifully or stronger, or be a judge like her, do something of meaning. And I can kind of forget it now. I mean, love everything about my mom. She's not a villain. She's just a very strong woman, and not a cuddly woman. And I realized in this film, even though it was about the stem cell, it really was in the stem cell, using this as the catalyst to make a huge change. And I find when I'm reflexive, when I talk about myself, my voice can falter more, and in this kind of dystonic stutter, and when I incorporate in my mind how this film is so universal that it really is a mirror for other people. It's not me anymore. It's like that is the most forgiving thing about storytelling. Most amazing thing is that you can give it away and it was mine. It doesn't matter. It's for anyone who wants to get rid of but work through aggravating chronic mental, emotional, or physical, or the changes we all have in COVID. It feels very universal to me, no matter what your issue. It's just like, how do I recommit myself to things that can help us or are important or can help anyone else? Very truly, this film felt like that, and hopefully can just be a connector. And that's what filmmaking and books have done. And the importance of claiming it's as verite as you could hope for, to not specifically like try and manipulate anyone. It was just me, and Rachel did me a solid.
So Rachel, talk a little bit. So you showed the movie at South by Southwest. You debuted it there. Was it a virtual premiere?
Yes, it was a virtual premiere. So,
and you started to get feedback. I'm curious about that. And you got picked up. You got picked up by Discovery. Congratulations. It's playing there now, right?
It's streaming on Discovery Plus. So the messages started trickling in. When you make a movie, you watch it 800 times. You're like checking every frame to make sure that the color looks good and the wind chimes aren't too loud. And
I took them down. They're gone.
Okay, for the sequel. So yeah, you become sort of, it's the law of diminishing returns. It's like oversaturation. You don't even know anything anymore. It's like, is this movie good? I think it's good. I don't know. But I had a true sense. I really did have a true sense when I was in the edit with Sloane Clevin, who I've made, this is my third film I've made with her, my first feature. I really felt like, we asked Selma to give us her cell phone diaries. Like, she started doing that before we started filming. We got access to all of that. She just handed them over to us. We knew that they were instrumental in telling the story. And in the moments where we couldn't be with Selma, I'd be like, okay, so I need you to film yourself and hold it, portrait, like it's a diary. And in the edit, when I saw the stuff that she handed over to us, I was like, wow, if she's willing to really bare her soul in this way, we're really going to help people. I had that in my mind. And that came true. Like, as we started to show the film, I've been overwhelmed by how many people who, regardless of if you have MS, if you're chronically ill, if you're disabled, if you have an autoimmune disease, if you're just like a human being in a skin sack alive, you can see yourself in Selma's story. And so people have just like overwhelmingly come to me since March 16th, 2021, saying, thank you for making this movie. Thank you, Selma, for making this movie and sharing so honestly, because it helps me feel less alone. And it's just been increasing since that South by Southwest. And now it's like every day we get a message. I know your DMs are probably full. People really have.
It means the most to me that And that's what good storytelling does, though. It's a connector. I mean, it really does. When you read a passage in a book and say, oh my God, I only thought that happened to me. Or when someone sees me falter, exhausted with the speech in that moment, people really see, or their husbands or their wives or their kids see, oh, this kind of weird glitch that we kind of made fun of, someone else does too. Like, that's the real thing that affects me. That there's certain people, certain families, chronic illness is tedious, and it takes a lot of people in people's lives don't have a lot of patience for it. It's invisible sometimes, or the symptoms, you're okay, and then you're just worn out, or this. I don't know. Tons of people are different, but I know there's a lot of people that feel like, oh, you're this, this happens to you too, or this, but you're not actively dying. It's not the end. Like, this, things happen in our human experience. And it makes me feel very much more useful if someone relates and is comforted.
So the stem cell transplant that you had is no longer available to people?
It's no longer available by from Dr. Burt at Northwestern, which sadly was one of the only US places I knew of that was using it for autoimmune, like lupus, scleroderma, MS cases that met the criteria. And I don't know anywhere else that does it in the United States. And I don't know if he'll be back. He's on a research sabbatical, but I do have to say it, nothing could bring that flare down. It was like 3 years, it just wasn't remitting. And I'm sure anxiety or not knowing what to expect, you feel like you're alone in there, and no doctor can give as much time as you're like, wait, is this forever? Is this going? I just didn't know. And so the stem cell did an incredible thing. I mean, that it really halted my MS progression. And I do think it is important. I'm not an HSCT junkie, but I certainly am saying the proof is in the pudding. When people are like, how are you doing better? I'm like, well, 1, I have relapse remitting, and 2, it's actually remitted now. And now I have time to recover some things. But, so that's also very wonderful news for people in the MS community. And hopefully he'll open back up, or other doctors will take on that mantle of being willing to help people. I hope,
Glad to hear that.
Some awareness. Dr. Burt really did me a solid. I was like the last one. Dr. Burt, well, I'll stick with them.
And your relationship with your son was a lovely part of this too. Arthur, how's he doing? Is he back in school? Is he allowed to go to school?
Yes, he's allowed to go. I am not immunocompromised. I have autoimmune issues, but I am vaccinated. I'm double vaccinated. He's not an age yet to get vaccinated, but he will. And the school has been great. He's joined football team, and we cut his hair, and that was a ritual that grew him up. I mean, he was like kind of in this space, and that haircut before this premiere, I feel like everyone just shed a big skin, and it is possible. That's what we do as people. There's cycles. This too shall pass. There's hits that are harder than others, and the future looks different. Or you make recoveries. There's cycles of life outside, COVID, shipping supply chains, documentary. I mean, there's so much that changes radically all the time. And I think our reaction into it and how we can help each other get through is a very, very necessary reminder.
Well, on that note, I think thank you both very much for making this movie and for what you went through and making something beautiful out of it. And onward.
Thank you
so
much, Anne.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks.